My name is Sophia Reynolds. 3 hours after my older sister married a duke in what the tabloids called the wedding of the decade, I opened my front door and found 6 royal guards standing on my quiet suburban lawn in Virginia Beach. They weren't regular security. These were the Queen's personal detail: crisp navy uniforms, polished boots, and an unmistakable air of quiet authority. Black SUVs lined my street like something out of a movie, their discreet blue lights flashing softly against the late afternoon sky. My neighbors were already peeking through curtains, phones probably recording. Mrs. Alvarez from next door had her hand over her mouth like she'd just seen a ghost. The tallest guard stepped forward, a woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice. "Lieutenant Commander Sophia Reynolds," she asked. I nodded slowly, still gripping the door handle. My heart was hammering, but years in Navy intelligence had taught me how to keep my face steady. "Yes, that's me." "Her Majesty requests your immediate presence," she said. No explanation, no small talk, just those words hanging in the warm Virginia air. For a second, I almost laughed, because while my sister Vanessa was exchanging vows with Duke Alexander under a floral arch worth more than my entire house, I hadn't even received an invitation. According to her, I was an embarrassment. A single mom with a military career who didn't fit the polished royal image, and now the Queen's guards were on my doorstep? If you've ever been quietly erased from your own family's biggest moment, you know that strange mix of hurt and disbelief. That was me, standing there in my faded jeans and old navy hoodie, dirt from my backyard garden still under my fingernails. I glanced back inside. My 8-year-old daughter Lily was coloring at the kitchen table, headphones on, completely unaware. The smell of the lasagna I'd planned for dinner still lingered. Normal life until this moment. "Mom," the guard said gently but firmly, "the convoy is waiting." I took a slow breath. Part of me wanted to close the door and pretend this wasn't happening. But another part, the part that had spent 16 years serving my country in silence, something bigger was unfolding. Something I couldn't walk away from. "Give me 5 minutes," I told her. She nodded respectfully. "Of course, Commander." I stepped back inside, closed the door, and leaned against it for a second. My hands were shaking just a little. Not from fear exactly, but from the weight of everything that had led to this. The years of being the reliable one. The quiet sacrifices no one ever saw. The phone call from Vanessa 6 months ago where she told me I didn't belong in her new world. If you're watching this, and you've ever felt like the supporting character in your own family story, stay with me. Because what happened next at that royal wedding changed everything I thought I knew about worth, about blood, and about the kind of strength that doesn't need a spotlight. I changed into my dress uniform, not to impress anyone, but because it reminded me who I was, the same uniform my sister once called too military for her perfect day. The irony wasn't lost on me. As I adjusted my collar in the mirror, I caught my reflection. Tired eyes, but steady. A woman who had learned to carry heavy things without complaint. When I stepped back outside, the guard opened the door of the lead SUV for me. I slid in, the leather cool against my palms. As we pulled away, I looked back at my little house, at Lily waving from the window. I'd quickly arranged for my neighbor to watch her, and at the ordinary life I'd built. None of us knew it then, but that short drive to the waterfront estate would lead me straight into the heart of a truth that had been hidden for 7 years. A truth that would turn my sister's fairy tale upside down and force us both to face what family really means. The convoy moved smoothly through traffic, no sirens, just quiet power. I sat in silence, watching the Chesapeake Bay come into view, wondering how a girl from a modest Ohio family had ended up here, uninvited to her sister's royal wedding, yet personally summoned by a queen. Little did I know, the real story wasn't about crowns or ceremonies. It was about the invisible threads that connect us, the debts we never speak of, and the moment when silent strength finally steps into the light. To understand why the Queen's guards showed up at my door that day, you have to go back to the beginning. My name is Sophia Reynolds, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the steady one in a family that always seemed to orbit around my older sister, Vanessa. We grew up in a modest split-level house just outside Columbus, Ohio. Dad worked maintenance for the local school district. Long hours fixing boilers and leaky roofs so we never went hungry. But there was never much extra. Mom was a nurse who worked nights in the pediatric ward. Money was tight, but love wasn't, at least not back then. Vanessa was 3 years older and always the shining star. She had this effortless way of drawing people in, bright smile, big dreams, walls covered with magazine cutouts of princesses, mansions, and red carpets. She wanted the kind of life you see in movies. I was different. I liked order, responsibility, and knowing I could count on myself. While she practiced runway walks in the living room, I was outside helping Dad mow lawns or sitting with Mom after her long shifts, making sure she ate something warm. We were actually really close as kids. I looked up to her like she hung the moon. When neighborhood kids teased her about her secondhand clothes, I'd stand in front of her, small fists ready. When she struggled with math, I'd stay up late explaining it until it clicked. And when our parents fought about bills, late at night, we'd sneak out to the back porch swing, wrapped in one blanket, whispering about the futures we'd build. I remember one summer when Vanessa was 16. She desperately wanted to attend a prestigious leadership camp, but the fee was more than my parents could manage. 13-year-old me spent every weekend mowing lawns and babysitting, quietly saving every dollar. When I handed her the envelope on the deadline day, she hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You didn't have to do that, Soph, but I did. That's what sisters were for. Or at least that's what I believed." Life started pulling us in different directions after high school. Vanessa moved to New York, chasing modeling gigs, event planning jobs, and wealthy social circles. She was ambitious, smart, and determined to rewrite her story. Joined the Navy right after graduation. The structure, the purpose, the sense of serving something bigger than myself. It felt like home. The years passed in a blur of deployments, training, and late-night study sessions for my intelligence certifications. We still talked, but the conversations grew shorter, more surface level. Vanessa's life became glamorous parties and influential friends. Mine became classified briefings and quiet loyalty to my team. Even after I became a single mom to Lily 8 years ago, I never asked for anything. Her father wasn't in the picture, and I chose to carry that weight alone. Vanessa would send expensive gifts for Lily's birthdays, designer clothes the little girl would outgrow in months, but she rarely made time for actual visits. I told myself it was okay. She was living her dream, I had mine. Last year, when Lily had a bad case of pneumonia and I was pulling extra duty, Vanessa called from some luxury resort. She sounded distracted, talking about her new boyfriend who might be royalty. I sat in the hospital room holding Lily's hand while the monitors beeped, reassuring my daughter everything would be fine. Vanessa promised to fly in. She never did. I didn't hold it against her. Not then. Looking back now, those small moments planted seeds I didn't notice at the time. Vanessa always needed to feel special, to stand out. And I was comfortable in the background, making sure the lights stayed on. I never minded being the reliable one. Until the day she made it clear that reliable had become embarrassing. When Vanessa first told me she was dating Duke Alexander of a respected European royal family, I genuinely laughed with joy. An American girl from Ohio catching the eye of actual royalty? It sounded like the fairy tale she'd always dreamed of. For a while, I was happy for her. I watched the tabloid coverage with a smile, thinking maybe our paths diverging wasn't such a bad thing. But as the engagement became official and wedding planning kicked into high gear, something shifted. Vanessa started curating her image more aggressively. Every photo, every interview, every public appearance had to be flawless, and slowly I began to feel the distance growing into a canyon. If you've ever watched someone you love rewrite the family story to make themselves the only main character, you know how quiet that kind of hurt can be. It doesn't scream. It just settles in your chest, heavy and familiar. That's where I was the day the royal guards arrived. Still the steady big sister on the outside, but carrying years of silent sacrifices on the inside. Little did I know, those sacrifices were about to matter in a way neither of us could have imagined. By the time Vanessa's engagement made international headlines, I had built a life that looked quiet from the outside, but carried its own kind of weight. I was Lieutenant Commander Sophia Reynolds, serving in Navy intelligence for 16 years. My days involved analyzing threats, briefing teams, and making decisions that affected real people in real time. But when I came home to our small townhouse in Virginia Beach, I traded classified files for the sound of my 8-year-old daughter, Lily, laughing or singing off-key in the backyard. Lily is my whole world. She has my dark hair and her father's curious eyes, though he chose to disappear long before she turned 1. I never regretted choosing single motherhood. Every deployment I came back from, every late night studying for promotions, it was all so she could have stability. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. to make her breakfast, drop her at school, then head to base. Evenings were for helping with homework, tending my little vegetable garden, and reading stories until she fell asleep. Simple, steady days, the kind I'd always valued. Vanessa's life, by contrast, looked like a highlight reel. Private jets, charity galas in Europe, photos with celebrities and minor royals. She'd call occasionally, voice bright and breathless, telling me about the latest extravagant trip, or the way Alexander looked at her like she was the only woman in the room. I'd listen, genuinely happy for her. "That's amazing, Van," I'd say, while stirring pasta on the stove with Lily tugging at my leg. I didn't resent her shine. I'd always believed there was room for both of us to succeed in our own ways. But being the reliable one comes with invisible costs. When Mom had knee surgery 2 years ago, I was the one who took 2 weeks of leave to care for her in Ohio. Vanessa sent flowers and a nice card. When Dad's truck broke down, I wired the money for repairs without being asked. Vanessa was too busy with wedding planning by then. I never complained. That wasn't my style. I'd learned early that love in our family often meant showing up without expecting applause. There was one night, about a year ago, when Lily spiked a high fever. I sat on the bathroom floor at 3 a.m., holding her while she cried, praying it wasn't something serious. I had an important briefing the next morning, but I called in and stayed home. Vanessa texted the next day asking for photos of Lily in her new dress she'd sent from Paris. She never asked how we were really doing. I told myself it was fine. Sisters grow up, lives get busy, but deep down, I felt the slow erosion of that childhood closeness. If you've ever been the one who quietly holds everything together while someone else chases the spotlight, you know that ache. It's not loud anger. It's a quiet question you ask yourself late at night. Do I even exist in this family story anymore? My career gave me purpose, though. In intelligence, I'd spent years working on operations that never made the news. One particular mission 7 years ago still lingered in my mind sometimes, but I kept it locked away like everything else classified. It was just another day on the job, helping where I was needed, then moving on without fanfare. That's how I lived my life. No drama, no spotlight, just doing what needed to be done. Even as wedding rumors swirled and Vanessa's social media filled with designer fittings and castle venues, I kept my routine. I'd watch the coverage sometimes after Lily went to bed, smiling at how radiant my sister looked. Part of me still rooted for her fairy tale. But another part noticed the growing distance in her texts. Conversations shifted from, "How's Lily?" to subtle hints about how certain family members might not fit the aesthetic. I pushed those doubts aside. I focused on what I could control, being a good mom, a solid officer, and tending my garden where tomato plants and sunflowers didn't care about royal protocols. They just needed water, sun, and time. Simple truths in a complicated world. That's who I was the afternoon the royal guards arrived. A woman who had learned to carry silent loads without complaint, steady. Dependable, maybe a little tired, but still showing up for the people who mattered. I had no idea that my years of quiet service were about to intersect with Vanessa's glittering new world, in the most unexpected way possible. The ordinary and the extraordinary were about to collide, and I would finally have to decide what my place in this family truly was. Then came the call that shifted everything. It was a crisp evening about 2 years ago. I was in the kitchen packing Lily's lunch for the next day when my phone lit up with Vanessa's name. I answered with a smile, expecting another story about some glamorous event in London. "Sophia, you're not going to believe this," she said, her voice practically vibrating. "Alexander asked me to marry him. I'm going to be a duchess." I froze with a juice box in my hand. For a second, I thought she was joking, but the excitement in her voice was real. I laughed, genuinely thrilled. "Van, that's incredible. Congratulations. Tell me everything." She did. For 20 minutes, she described the proposal on a private yacht, the ring that sparkled like it belonged in a museum, and how the royal family had already welcomed her with open arms. I listened, asking questions, sharing in her joy the way I always had. When we hung up, I hugged Lily tight and told her Aunt Vanessa was getting married to a real duke. My daughter's eyes went wide with wonder, the same wonder I used to feel hearing Vanessa's dreams as kids. For the first few months, I stayed supportive. I sent her encouraging texts when photos of the engagement leaked to the press. I even helped her brainstorm ideas for the wedding favors one late night when she called stressed. But slowly, the tone of our conversations began to change. Vanessa started talking less about us as sisters and more about the image we need to protect. The first real crack appeared 6 months before the wedding. I had flown to New York for a quick visit during a training break. We met at an upscale cafe near her apartment. She looked every bit the future duchess. Perfect hair, designer dress, posture like she'd been practicing for years. I was in civilian clothes, still carrying the quiet confidence of my uniform underneath. Halfway through our salads, she set her fork down. "Soph, about the wedding, we've been thinking about the guest list and the overall aesthetic." I nodded, sensing where this was going. "Of course, whatever you need." She hesitated, then said it carefully. "It might be best if you didn't wear your uniform. And maybe tone down the single mom thing. The press can be brutal, and Alexander's family is very traditional." Her words landed like a quiet punch. I sat there, staring at my plate, feeling the weight of 16 years of service reduced to something that didn't fit the image, but I smiled softly anyway. "I understand it's your day, Van." That should have been my warning, but the real exclusion came a few weeks later. The official invitations went out. Mine never arrived. When I gently asked about it during our next call, there was a long pause. Sophia, she corrected herself quickly. "Only immediate family and close friends who align with the vision are invited. You know how these things work." I felt my stomach tighten. "Vanessa, I am immediate family." Another pause. Then her voice hardened just a little. "You don't belong there, Soph. You never really have. You're steady, reliable. But this is my moment to shine." Having a Navy officer who's also a single mom in the front row would just create questions. "You're an embarrassment to the new life I'm building." The words hung between us like smoke. I didn't cry, I didn't yell. I simply said, "I hope you have the day you always dreamed of," and ended the call. But inside, something broke quietly. The sister who once hugged me for mowing lawns all summer now saw me as a liability. If you've ever been told by someone you love that your entire life is an embarrassment, you know the hollow ache that follows. It's not dramatic rage. It's a deep, tired sadness that makes you question every sacrifice you ever made for them. After that, the silent exclusion became systematic. Wedding updates stopped coming my way. When Mom asked why I wasn't helping with planning, Vanessa told her I was too busy with work and Lily. She painted me as distant, uninterested. The truth was, every time I offered help, I was gently, or not so gently, pushed aside. I chose silence. No arguments, no public complaints. I focused on Lily, on my garden, on my duties. I attended a local veterans memorial service on the morning of the wedding instead. Standing in my dress uniform among people who understood quiet service felt more honest than forcing myself into a world that didn't want me. As the ceremony unfolded on television, I sat in my living room watching my sister glow under that floral arch. She looked beautiful, radiant, everything she'd always wanted. For a moment, despite the hurt, I still wished her well. That's the complicated part of loving family. You can be deeply wounded by them and still want their happiness. But as I watched Duke Alexander glance around with a furrowed brow during the ceremony, I had no idea what storm was quietly building on the other side of the screen. I had no idea that 7 years earlier, in a classified operation I had buried deep in my memory, I had crossed paths with the Queen in a way that would soon bring royal guards to my door. The exclusion hurt. But it also freed me to stay true to who I was, and that quiet strength was about to become the most important thing in the room. The weeks after that phone call felt like watching a door slowly close on years of shared history. Vanessa didn't stop there. The exclusion became methodical, almost calculated, as if she were carefully rewriting our family narrative to fit her royal future. She started with small things. Group chats for wedding planning suddenly no longer included me. When I texted asking if there was anything I could help with from Virginia, her reply was polite but distant. "We've got it covered, Soph. Focus on Lily and your work." I understood the message. My presence was no longer welcome in any part of her new chapter. Then came the deeper cuts. During one late-night call, her voice had that familiar mix of excitement and tension. "Alexander's family is very particular about public perception," she said. "They love that I'm American, but they want the story to be clean, inspirational, not complicated." I was sitting on the edge of Lily's bed, rubbing her back as she fell asleep after a long day. "Complicated how?" I asked quietly. Vanessa sighed, like I was forcing her to spell it out. "You know, the single mom thing, the military career, people with questions. Why isn't she married? Why does she have a child alone?" It pulls focus from the romance. You've always been the strong, silent type, but this isn't your world anymore. You're an embarrassment to the image we're creating. Those words landed heavy. I stayed silent for a long moment, listening to Lily's steady breathing beside me. "I see," I finally said. My voice didn't shake. Years of briefings under pressure had trained me well. "I hope the day is everything you want it to be, Van." She softened just a fraction. "It's not personal, Soph. It's just I've worked so hard for this. I deserve one day where I'm not in anyone's shadow." Shadow. That word stayed with me long after we hung up. I had never tried to cast one. I had only ever tried to hold the light for her when she needed it. If you've ever been called an embarrassment by the person you sacrifice the most for, you know it cuts deeper than any insult from a stranger. It makes you replay every quiet choice you made for them. The money, the time, the emotional support, wondering when you became the problem. The final conversation came 2 weeks before the wedding. I had sent a simple message offering to fly in early to help with anything behind the scenes. No spotlight needed. Her response was a voice note, voice clipped and impatient. "Sophia, please stop pushing this. You don't fit. You never really did. While I was out building connections and creating a name for myself, you were playing soldier and raising a kid by yourself. It's admirable in its own way, but it doesn't belong at a royal wedding. Alexander's mother already asked about family. And I had to smooth things over, just stay home. For once, let me have this without complications." I listened to that message 3 times in my quiet living room after Lily went to bed. Then I deleted it. Not out of anger, but because holding on to it wouldn't change anything. Instead, I walked out to my garden, knelt in the dirt, and tended the tomato plants under the porch light. The soil was cool and honest. It didn't judge. It didn't rewrite history. That night, I made a quiet decision. No more reaching out, no arguments, no trying to prove my worth. I would attend the local veterans' memorial service on the morning of her wedding, honor the people who understood real sacrifice, and then spend the afternoon with Lily. Simple, dignified, true to who I was. But Vanessa wasn't done. She began shaping the family narrative. Mom called me a few days later, voice worried. "Vanessa says you're too busy with work to come. Is everything okay between you two?" I didn't correct the story. I simply said I loved them and would see them when things settled. Protecting my peace had become more important than correcting her version of events. If you've ever chosen silence not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to carry the truth alone, you understand the power in that choice. It's not passive, it's strategic. It's preparation for whatever comes next. As the wedding day approached, I watched the media frenzy from afar. Photos of Vanessa in designer gowns, interviews where she spoke about her fairy tale journey from Ohio to royalty. She looked radiant, happy, and part of me, the part that still remembered the little girl on the porch swing, was glad for her. But another part recognized the pattern. Vanessa had always needed to be the main character. My steady presence had become a threat to that spotlight. Her exclusion wasn't just about aesthetics or protocol. It was about control, ensuring no one overshadowed her perfect day. I had no idea then that her carefully constructed story was about to crack open. 7 years earlier, during a classified mission in Eastern Europe, I had done something that put me on the Queen's radar in a way no one, not even Vanessa, could have predicted. A silent act of service that was about to demand recognition at the worst possible moment for my sister. The morning of the wedding, I stood in my dress uniform at the Veterans Memorial, listening to taps echo across the cemetery. The breeze carried the scent of fresh flowers and salt from the bay. I felt grounded, at peace, completely unaware that royal guards were already mobilizing, heading toward my Skyet Street with a message from the Queen herself. In the days leading up to the wedding, I made a choice that felt both empowering and lonely. I chose silence. Not the weak kind that comes from fear, but the deliberate, strategic kind that comes from clarity. I stopped reaching out. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped trying to earn a seat at a table that clearly didn't want me there. Instead, I turned inward and focused on what I could control. I spent the mornings running along the beach with Lily, her small hand in mine as the waves crashed nearby. In the evenings, I worked in my garden until the sun went down, pulling weeds and watering the soil like it was therapy. The physical work helped quiet the storm in my mind. I reviewed old mission notes from my career, not because I needed to, but because it reminded me of my own worth outside of anyone else's opinion. 16 years of service. Intelligence work that saved lives in ways the public would never know. Raising a daughter who was kind, curious, and strong. That was enough. It had to be enough. Vanessa's exclusion wasn't random. I could see the pattern now. She was protecting her narrative. In her new world of titles and expectations, my story, the single mother in uniform who had always been the reliable background character, threatened to complicate her fairy tale. And she was willing to rewrite family history to keep her spotlight pure. The pressure from the rest of the family came subtly at first. Mom called 3 days before the wedding, her voice tired but hopeful. "Sophia, honey, Vanessa says you're swamped with work and can't make it, but maybe you could still come for the reception, just for a little while." I could hear the uncertainty in her tone. She was caught in the middle, wanting to believe the best about both daughters. I took a deep breath, staring out at the bay from my backyard. "Mom, it's okay. Vanessa made her wishes clear. I'm going to honor them and spend the day with Lily and the veterans who served beside me. I love you both. That hasn't changed." There was a long pause. "She's just stressed, sweetheart. This is a big transition for her. Don't hold it against her." I smiled sadly, even though she couldn't see me. "I'm not holding anything, Mom. I'm just choosing peace." Dad texted later that evening, short and to the point, like always. "You sure you're all right with missing it?" I replied honestly. "I'm sure. This is her day. I'll celebrate in my own way." He didn't push further. He never did. But I could feel the quiet disappointment in the family chat that had suddenly gone silent on the topic of my attendance. If you've ever been the one who quietly removes yourself from drama instead of fighting for scraps of belonging, you know how heavy that decision feels. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's a private boundary drawn in the sand, protecting your heart while the world keeps spinning. I used that time for something deeper too. I sat down one night after Lily was asleep and wrote a letter I never planned to send. Not to Vanessa, but to myself. A reminder of every time I had shown up for her, the money for camp, the late-night talks, the hospital nights with Lily, the deployments where I still made sure to call and check on her dreams. I didn't do it for validation. I did it to reclaim my own story, to remind myself that my worth wasn't defined by whether I fit into her polished picture. The night before the wedding, Vanessa sent one last message. It was a group text to the family, but I knew it was aimed at me. Thank you all for understanding that this day needs to be perfect. Some things are better kept simple. The implication was clear. I read it once, turned off my phone, and went to read Lily a bedtime story about brave princesses who didn't need castles to be strong. The morning of the wedding, I put on my dress uniform with quiet pride. The medals on my chest represented real sacrifices, friends lost, long separations from Lily, nights spent analyzing threats so others could sleep safely. I drove to the Veterans Memorial Service instead of watching the live coverage. Standing among men and women who understood service without applause felt grounding. Chief Dawson, an old mentor in his 70s, clapped me on the shoulder. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world today, Commander." I smiled faintly. "Just family stuff, Chief, nothing new." As taps played and flags waved gently in the breeze, I let myself feel the full weight of the exclusion. It hurt, deeply, but beneath the hurt was something steadier, resolve. I had chosen not to beg, not to argue, not to disrupt her day. That silence wasn't weakness. It was preparation, it was dignity. It was the quiet strategy of a woman who had learned that true strength often speaks loudest when it chooses not to raise its voice. Little did any of us know, that same silence had kept a 7-year-old secret buried. A classified mission in Eastern Europe, where my team had prevented a devastating attack on visiting European royalty. I had played a key role in protecting lives that day, including someone whose identity I never knew at the time, the Queen herself. While Vanessa exchanged vows under crystal chandeliers and blooming arches, the truth was already moving. Royal intelligence had finally connected the dots. The Queen had been searching for the American officer who saved her life years ago. And now, thanks to a casual mention of my last name during wedding preparations, that search had led straight to my quiet street in Virginia Beach. The guards were already en route. I returned home that afternoon, changed into comfortable clothes, and started making lasagna for Lily and me. Normal life. Peaceful life. Until the low rumble of multiple vehicles turned onto my street, and 6 members of the Queen's personal detail stepped onto my lawn. My silent strategy was about to meet a truth that would shake my sister's entire world. The drive to the waterfront estate felt surreal. I sat in the back of the sleek black SUV, watching the Chesapeake Bay sparkle under the late afternoon sun. The royal guards remained professional and silent, answering only what they could. My mind raced through every possible scenario, but none of them prepared me for what was waiting. When we arrived, the scale of the wedding was overwhelming. Luxury cars, camera crews, guests in elegant attire moving between pavilions overlooking the water. Security parted like a wave as our convoy pulled up. Heads turned, whispers spread. And then I saw her, the Queen herself, standing near the main reception building with Duke Alexander and a small group of senior royals. Vanessa was a little further back, her face pale. The lead guard opened my door. I stepped out in my dress uniform, shoulders straight, heart steady. The Queen turned toward me immediately. She was exactly as regal as the photographs, but there was something warmer in her eyes, recognition. "Lieutenant Commander Sophia Reynolds," she said, her voice carrying quiet authority, mixed with genuine emotion. She walked straight to me and took both my hands in hers. "At last, we have been looking for you for 7 years." I blinked, completely lost. "Your Majesty, I'm sorry, I don't understand." She smiled gently, the kind of smile that holds years of unspoken gratitude. 7 years ago, during a state visit to Eastern Europe, my family and I were in grave danger. An assassination plot had been uncovered too late. In the chaos of that night, an American naval intelligence officer and her team acted with extraordinary courage and precision. You prevented a tragedy that would have changed the course of our nation. The world seemed to tilt. Fragments of that classified mission flooded back. I remembered the tense briefings, the long hours monitoring communications, the split-second decisions in the field. I had coordinated critical intelligence that helped neutralize threats before they reached the royal delegation. I had personally ensured the safe extraction of key personnel when things went sideways. But I never knew the full identities of those we protected. It was just another operation. Another day of doing the job. The Queen continued softly. You saved my life that night, Commander, and the life of my granddaughter. You asked for no recognition. You disappeared back into your duties without a word. We have searched quietly ever since, honoring your request for anonymity until today. Alexander stepped forward, his expression filled with respect. When Vanessa mentioned her sister's name during preparations, the pieces finally connected. My mother realized who you were. We had to bring you here. I stood there, stunned, as the weight of that long-buried mission settled over me. All those years I had carried the memory as just another classified file. Now it was standing in front of me in the form of a queen, who had been searching for the woman who protected her family in silence. If you've ever done something important without expecting thanks, only for it to return to you years later in the most unexpected way, you understand how overwhelming that moment feels. It wasn't pride that filled my chest. It was a quiet sense of validation that the path I had chosen, the steady, unseen service, had mattered more than I ever realized. Vanessa stood frozen a short distance away. Her perfect composure was cracking. She looked at me with wide eyes, a mix of shock, fear, and something deeper, regret perhaps. The sister she had called an embarrassment was suddenly the reason the Queen had interrupted her own son's wedding. The Queen turned slightly toward the gathered family and advisors. This woman protected us when no one else could. And today, we learn she was deliberately excluded from this celebration. Her voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. We will address this properly. I glanced at Vanessa. For the first time in years, I saw the little girl from Ohio beneath the polished Duchess facade. She had built her new life on control and image, only for the truth about real character to arrive uninvited, literally. In that moment, standing between my past sacrifice and my sister's present choices, everything shifted. The silent strategy I had chosen wasn't just about protecting my peace. It had been preparing me for a truth that no amount of exclusion could erase. The Queen motioned for me to join them inside a private room. Come, Commander. There is much to discuss before we return to the guests. As I followed, I felt the invisible threads of 7 years finally pulling tight. What had been buried in classified reports was now stepping into the light, at the very wedding where I had been told I didn't belong. The ride from my quiet neighborhood to the luxurious waterfront estate took about 40 minutes, but it felt like stepping into another world. The convoy moved with smooth precision. No flashing lights, no sirens, just quiet power that parted traffic effortlessly. I sat in the back seat, hands folded in my lap, still processing the Queen's words. 7 years, a mission I had filed away as just another operation. Now it was the reason I was being escorted like someone important to the very event where I had been deliberately erased. The guards were respectful but reserved. When I asked what exactly was happening, the lead officer simply replied, "Her Majesty will explain everything, Commander. Your presence was requested the moment the connection was confirmed." As we approached the estate, the full spectacle came into view. White pavilions stretched along the Chesapeake Bay, crystal chandeliers sparkling even in daylight, guests in designer gowns and tailored suits mingling under floral arches. News helicopters hovered at a distance, and camera crews lined the perimeter. This was the fairy tale Vanessa had spent years crafting. And I was arriving in the middle of it, uninvited and unexpected. Security cleared a path immediately. Our vehicles rolled right up to the main reception building. When my door opened, hundreds of eyes turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind across water. I stepped out in my navy dress uniform, the metals catching the light. I could feel the weight of their stares, curiosity, confusion, recognition of the uniform. Vanessa stood near the entrance beside Alexander, her face drained of color. Our mother gasped audibly. Dad looked stunned, holding Mom's hand tightly. The queen approached me again, this time with Alexander at her side. She placed a gentle hand on my arm. "Walk with us, Commander," she said warmly. "There is no need for ceremony between us." We moved inside a private lounge area just off the main pavilion. The doors closed behind us, muffling the sounds of the reception. The room was elegant but intimate, soft lighting, fresh flowers, a few trusted advisors present. Vanessa followed reluctantly, her perfect updo slightly disheveled from nervous hands running through it. The queen turned to the small group. "Today, while celebrating love and family, we discovered a profound truth. Lieutenant Commander Sophia Reynolds is the officer who saved my life and the life of my granddaughter 7 years ago, during the attempted attack in Eastern Europe. She acted with courage, skill, and complete selflessness." And yet the queen's gaze shifted calmly toward Vanessa. She was not invited to this wedding. The silence in the room was deafening. Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes darted between me and the queen. It was a misunderstanding," she started, voice shaky. "Sophia's schedule is always so busy with the Navy and Lily. I didn't want to burden her." I stood quietly, saying nothing. This wasn't my moment to attack. So my silent strategy had always been about truth revealing itself in its own time. Alexander spoke next, his voice low but firm. "Vanessa, I asked about your sister months ago. You told me she couldn't attend due to duty. You never mentioned she wasn't invited." Vanessa's carefully built composure began to fracture. "I just wanted one day focused on us. Sophia has always been the strong one, the responsible one. People admire her in ways that make me feel like I'm still trying to catch up. I was scared her presence would shift the attention." The queen listened without interruption, her expression one of quiet understanding rather than anger. "Character is not a threat to love, my dear. It is its foundation." I finally spoke, my voice calm and even. "I never wanted to take anything from you, Van. I only ever wanted to celebrate with you. But I respect your choices. I came because Her Majesty asked me to." In that private room, the layers peeled back. Vanessa admitted in halting words how the pressure of becoming a duchess had amplified old insecurities. She had always felt like she was performing to be enough, while I simply was enough through quiet actions. The exclusion wasn't pure cruelty. It was fear dressed up as control. A smart, calculated move by someone who had learned to protect her spotlight at all costs. The queen nodded thoughtfully. "Then it is time the truth is shared with everyone present. With your permission, Commander." I looked at Vanessa. For the first time in a long while, I saw my sister, not the future duchess, but the girl from Ohio who used to share secrets on the porch swing. She gave the smallest nod, tears gathering in her eyes. As we prepared to step back out to the guests, I felt the big shift happening inside me. The woman who had been erased was now being brought into the light, not by force, but by the quiet power of truth and timing. My years of silent service had spoken louder than any invitation ever could. The doors opened, the queen led the way, and the entire wedding reception was about to witness a story much deeper than the fairy tale they had come to celebrate. The doors to the main pavilion opened, and the queen led us back into the sunlight. Hundreds of guests turned in their seats. The gentle hum of conversation died instantly. Cameras that had been discreetly rolling for the reception now focused entirely on our small group. I walked a step behind the queen, my dress uniform feeling both heavy and grounding in that moment. She approached the microphone at the center of the head table with natural grace. The orchestra had gone quiet. Even the breeze over the Chesapeake Bay seemed to hold its breath. "My dear friends and family," the queen began, her voice carrying clearly across the pavilion, "today we celebrate love, commitment, and the joining of two beautiful families. But before we continue, there is someone I must properly introduce." She extended her hand toward me. "This is Lieutenant Commander Sophia Reynolds of the United States Navy. My son's sister-in-law, and the woman who saved my life and the life of my granddaughter 7 years ago." A ripple of gasps moved through the crowd. I stood tall but kept my expression calm, hands clasped behind my back the way I'd done during countless military ceremonies. The Queen continued, recounting the classified mission with dignity and gratitude. She spoke of the assassination attempt, the chaos, the critical intelligence and decisive actions my team had taken to protect the royal delegation. She emphasized that I had asked for no recognition, no reward. I had simply done my duty and disappeared back into service. "You never knew who you were protecting that night, Commander," she said, turning to me with warm eyes. "But I have never forgotten." And today we learned that this remarkable woman was deliberately excluded from this wedding by someone who felt her presence might overshadow the day. The silence was absolute. Then the Queen smiled. "True character does not seek the spotlight. It simply shines when needed most. Today, we honor that light." She began to applaud. Alexander joined immediately, then my parents. One by one, guests rose to their feet. The applause grew from polite respect into something deeper, a genuine standing ovation. Veterans in the crowd, diplomats, even some of the press who had put down their cameras, stood and clapped with real emotion. The sound washed over me like a wave. If you've ever spent years doing the right thing without anyone noticing, only for that quiet work to be seen all at once, you understand how surreal that moment feels. My chest tightened, not with pride, but with a profound sense of being truly seen. Perhaps for the first time by my own family. I caught Vanessa's eyes across the space. Tears were streaming down her face, not the controlled, camera-ready kind. Real raw tears. She wasn't angry. She looked broken open in a way that only truth can do. In that moment, standing before hundreds of witnesses, the sister who had called me an embarrassment was watching the woman she tried to erase receive the kind of recognition she had always chased. The Queen stepped aside and gently guided me toward the microphone. I hadn't prepared any words, but they came naturally, calm and steady. "Thank you, Your Majesty," I said softly. "I was only doing my job, what any of us in uniform would do for those in need. I never expected thanks. I certainly never expected to be here today. But I'm grateful to stand with my family and celebrate love the real kind that survives even our mistakes." The applause surged again. Lily's face suddenly appeared in my mind. I made a mental note to tell her this story one day in a way she could understand. Not about crowns or titles, but about doing what's right even when no one is watching. As I stepped back, the weight I had carried for months began to lift. The silent strategy had worked. Not through confrontation, but through patience and truth. The woman who had been told she didn't belong was now standing at the center of the story. Not as a threat, but as the missing piece that made it whole. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low over the Chesapeake Bay, I stepped out onto a quiet balcony overlooking the water. The sounds of the reception, hotter, clinking glasses, soft music, felt distant. For the first time all day, I was alone with my thoughts. The weight of everything that had happened settled gently, no longer crushing, but simply present. The balcony door opened behind me. I didn't need to turn around. I already knew it was Vanessa. Her footsteps were hesitant, slower than the confident stride of the future Duchess I had watched earlier. She stopped beside me at the railing, the breeze catching strands of her hair that had escaped her elegant updo. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The water shimmered with golden light, and the silence between us felt heavy but honest. "Soph," her voice cracked. "I don't even know where to begin." I turned to face her. Up close, without the cameras or the crowd, she looked like my sister again. The girl from Ohio who used to share secrets on the porch swing. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes red. No performance left. "Try the truth," I said gently. She took a shaky breath. "I was scared. For years, I watched you be the strong one. The one who showed up, who sacrificed, who never needed validation. When I finally had this chance to shine, to become someone people admired, I convinced myself you would steal that light. Not because you wanted to, but because you already had it. I called you an embarrassment, because admitting how much I admired you felt too vulnerable." Her words hung in the air. I felt tears well up, but they weren't bitter, they were releasing. "I never wanted your spotlight, Van," I replied softly. "I only ever wanted my sister back, the one who used to let me defend her, The one I lent money to for that leadership camp. The one I sat with in the hospital when Lily was sick. I've always been proud of you, even when it hurt. Vanessa's shoulders trembled as she cried. I'm so sorry, for the invitation, for the lies, for making you feel like you didn't belong. You've always belonged. I was just too afraid to share the stage. I stepped closer and pulled her into a hug. It wasn't perfect or cinematic. It was two sisters who had lost their way, finding each other again in the quiet. We stood there for a long time, letting years of distance dissolve in the salt air. When we finally pulled apart, I looked her in the eyes. I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't mean going back to how things were. I've learned I need boundaries now. I'll be here for the real moments, the ones that matter, not the performances. She nodded, wiping her tears. I understand, and I want to earn that back, slowly, honestly. If you've ever had to forgive someone who broke your heart while still loving them, you know it's not weakness. It's strength. It's choosing healing over resentment. Family isn't perfect, but with honesty and grace, it can find its way home again. That night, the Queen invited me to a private family dinner. No speeches, just real conversation. I told stories about Lily, about my garden, about the small things that make life meaningful. Vanessa listened, really listened. Months have passed since that day. Life didn't change overnight, but it changed. Vanessa calls more often now, not for appearances, but to ask about Lily's school or how my garden is growing. We are rebuilding, one honest conversation at a time. If this story touched you, if you've ever felt erased by your own family or struggled with being the steady one, remember this. Your quiet strength matters. Character outlasts titles. Kindness echoes longer than applause. And sometimes, the people who hurt us the most are the ones most in need of our grace. Type healing in the comments if you believe family can still find its way back. And if this resonated, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for sitting with me through this. Take care of yourselves and each other.